My name is Tessa. I'm 16. And the night my life shattered began like any other family dinner. I was still wearing my school clothes, my fingers smudged with paint from the art project I'd stayed late to finish. I should have been thinking about the spring dance or the gallery that had just agreed to show my work. Instead, I was staring across the table at my brother's face, twisted with a kind of anger I had never seen before. It started with one sentence. I mentioned, maybe a little too proudly, that the gallery wanted to feature my paintings, that my art teacher believed I had a real shot at a scholarship. The room went silent. My parents offered a distracted, "That's nice, honey," then immediately turned back to asking my brother about his grades, his future, his plans. I laughed it off and joked, "Guess almost dying of stress for my art doesn't count as an achievement in this house, right?" That's when his chair scraped back violently. He stood so fast his glass tipped over, water spilling across the table, his eyes locked on mine, burning. "You think you're the only one who works hard," he snapped. I fired back, saying something about him always being the favorite, about how tired I was of feeling like a background extra in my own home. It was like striking a match over gasoline. He came around the table, his voice rising, his words sharp, accusing me of trying to make him look bad. I stood my ground until he grabbed my arm. The argument exploded. I remember shouting, his fingers digging into my skin, my back slamming into the cool frame of the decorative glass door between the kitchen and the hallway. He stepped closer, jaw clenched, and in one sudden rush of rage, he shoved me hard. My body flew backward through the glass. There was the sickening crash as it shattered, the sting of impact, the cold bite of the floor, then frantic footsteps, his panicked voice yelling, "It was an accident. I didn't mean to." Somewhere behind him, my parents were already repeating the same words. After that, everything went dark. Before I tell you what he said when people started asking questions and what I did the day I finally walked out of that house, tell me what time it is where you are and where you're listening from. I want to see how far this story of family betrayal and waking up to a different life can travel. Darkness isn't quiet. No one tells you that. People think a coma is like sleep, like nothing at all. For me, it felt like being trapped behind thick glass, hearing the world on the other side but unable to move, speak, or open my eyes. I don't know how long I floated there. At first, time didn't feel real. There were only sounds. The steady beep of machines. The soft shuffle of shoes. The rustle of fabric when someone sat beside me. And voices. Always the voices. My parents' voices came first. My mom's was shaky, cracked from crying. It was an accident, she kept saying. He didn't mean it. He lost control for a second. My dad's voice was lower, tight with tension. "Well, tell them she slipped. The floor was wet." He tried to grab her. "That's it. We don't need the police digging into this. The family doesn't need that." Accident. Slipped. Tried to grab her. I wanted to scream that it wasn't true. He hadn't tried to catch me. He had thrown me. But my mouth wouldn't move. My fingers wouldn't twitch. My thoughts were razor sharp and completely useless inside a body that refused to respond. Days blurred together. Sometimes I heard doctors giving updates. Head trauma. Multiple cuts. Glass lacerations. "It's a miracle she's alive," one of them said. Someone else asked, "What exactly happened?" My mother answered too quickly. They were arguing. She stepped back, lost her balance, and fell through the glass door. My son tried to stop her. She said it smoothly, like she'd practiced. Each time the story was told, it became cleaner, safer, more convenient. Every version pushed me further from the truth. I learned things I wasn't meant to know. I heard my brother sobbing once, his breaths hitching as he said, "I told you it got out of hand. You said you'd fix it. You promised." My dad replied sharply, "We are fixing it. You will stick to the story. Do you understand? If you love this family, you will not mention the word shove again." My heart pounded even though my body lay perfectly still. So that was it. They knew the truth. They just chose the version that protected him. Another time, an aunt I barely saw sat by my bed and whispered, "Oh, Tess, what did they do to you?" Her voice dropped lower. "You didn't just slip, did you?" No one answered. But the silence that followed said enough. In that silent, frozen world, a new clarity formed. I realized that while I was stuck there, my story was being rewritten without me. I had always been the quiet one, the easy kid. Now I was the girl in the hospital bed who couldn't contradict a single lie. Somewhere in that darkness, anger began to burn. I didn't just want to wake up. I wanted my voice back. I wanted the truth back. And I wanted everyone who chose the easy lie over me to look me in the eye and face what they had done. The day I truly woke up wasn't dramatic. No sudden gasp. No movie-style sit-up. I surfaced in stages, like rising through deep water. First, I sensed light behind my eyelids. Then I realized I could move my fingers just a little. One morning, I heard a nurse say, "Tessa, if you can hear me, can you try to squeeze my hand?" It felt like lifting a car, but my fingers closed weakly around hers. The room erupted into motion. "Get her parents," she said. When I finally opened my eyes, the brightness stabbed. Everything blurry. My head throbbed. My throat felt raw. My mom was suddenly there, tears spilling. "Oh my God, baby. You're back. You're okay. You're okay." For a moment, instinct took over. I wanted to sink into her arms and let her words smooth everything away. But the memory of their whispers, their rehearsed lies, snapped into focus. I stared at her and croaked. "How long?" She swallowed. "You've been in a coma for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of them controlling the story. 3 weeks of my brother hiding behind the word accident. 3 weeks of everyone deciding who I was and what had really happened." As my mind cleared, I noticed what else had changed. Flowers everywhere. Balloons. Cards from people at school calling me brave, strong, a fighter. One card made my stomach twist. "He told us how you slipped," someone had written. "We're so glad he tried to help you." Tried to help me. He was being praised as the brother who almost saved me from my own clumsiness. My art teacher sent a long letter saying the gallery was willing to hold my spot until I recovered. But there was a line about my parents having serious concerns about stress, about whether I should step back from art for my health. Step back from the one thing that felt like it was truly mine. Even my future was being decided without me. Physical therapy began soon after. Every movement hurt, but the pain felt honest. My body didn't lie. It remembered the shove, the glass, the fall. While I was learning to walk steadily again, I was also learning more about the version of events that had been sold to everyone else. Nurses would say things like, "It was such a freak accident. You kids and your arguments, huh?" A neighbor who came to visit shook her head and said, "You're lucky your brother was there. He told us he reached for you, but it was too late." Every comment was another reminder. In the story the world believed, I was the fragile girl who slipped, and he was the almost hero. The only person who looked at me like she didn't fully believe that version was my aunt. One evening, when it was just the two of us, she leaned in close. "I heard them in the hallway when they thought you were gone for good," she murmured. I heard the word shove. Then I heard them decide never to use it again. "You're not crazy, Tessa. You're not imagining this." My chest tightened. I wasn't alone. Someone else had heard what I'd heard in the dark. "Why would they do that?" I rasped. She sighed. "Because it's easier to protect the child they've already invested all their hopes in than to admit he hurt you. They're scared. But that doesn't mean you have to accept it." That night, staring up at the hospital ceiling, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would play along just long enough to get my strength back. I would learn exactly how far their lies had spread. And when I could finally stand on my own 2 feet, I would make sure the truth they buried didn't stay buried. Once my eyes were open, everyone seemed to forget that my ears had been open long before. They spoke more carefully around me now, but habits slip. I listened to every word like it was evidence. On the outside, I showed them what they wanted to see. The fragile girl, grateful to be alive, overwhelmed, too tired to argue. Inside, I was cataloging everything. My brother avoided my eyes at first. When he finally forced himself to visit alone, he stood at the foot of my bed, his hands shoved into his pockets. "Hey," he said, like we'd just run into each other at school. I'm glad you're okay. I watched him for a long moment. They said I slipped, I said slowly. Is that what you told them? His jaw tightened. You hit the door, he muttered. It broke. It all happened so fast. That wasn't an answer. Did I slip? I pressed. He stared at the wall. You stepped back. My hand was on you. It was an accident. There it was again, the word that had become their shield. I didn't push him further that day. Not yet. I needed him to feel safe enough to talk. I needed him to forget that I would remember every word. In therapy sessions, I pushed myself to take one more step, one more stretch. The sooner I got out of that hospital, the sooner I could see what had happened to my room, my art, my life. At the same time, I noticed small cracks forming in my parents' perfect script. A social worker came by once, asking neutral questions about conflict at home. My mom's smile was a little too bright as she answered. Of course siblings fought sometimes, but nothing serious. We were a close family. The social worker glanced at me and asked softly, Do you feel safe at home, Tessa? 3 sets of eyes burned into me. I could feel my parents silently begging me to say yes. I could feel my aunt silently begging me to tell the truth. I took a slow breath. I will, I said. When we stopped pretending that night never happened, the room went stiff. The social worker wrote something down. My mom rushed in quickly. She's still confused. She's been through so much. I interrupted, my voice weak but steady. I remember being pushed. It was the first time I'd said it out loud to someone with authority. No one responded directly, but after that, a new tension filled the air. At home, from what my aunt told me, things were shifting too. Some relatives had heard different versions of the story and started asking questions. My parents scrambled to keep control, calling it gossip and misunderstanding. The harder they tried to manage the story, the clearer it became that there was something to hide. The final straw came when I overheard my parents talking outside my room one night. My mom whispered, What if she tells someone everything? My dad sighed. Then we deal with it. She won't want to destroy this family. In that moment, something inside me hardened. They were counting on my love to keep me quiet. They were counting on my fear of breaking the family to protect the person who had already broken me. They didn't realize the girl they'd known before the glass shattered was gone. The new version of me had spent weeks in the dark listening to them choose him over me. The love was still there, but it wasn't blind anymore. I started planning. If they had rewritten my story while I couldn't speak, I would rewrite the ending now that I could. And I wouldn't do it with screaming or smashed plates. I would do it with the one thing they'd taken from me. The truth, in my own words, on my own terms. I waited until I was back home to confront my brother properly. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. The glass door had been replaced. New panels, no cracks, as if nothing had ever happened there. My room was cleaner than I'd left it. Some of my paintings were stacked neatly in the corner. A few were missing. My mom said they'd been damaged in the accident. I wondered if they were really ruined, or if this was just another way to erase parts of who I'd been before that night. A week after I came home, I asked my brother to talk. Just us, I said. In my room. He hesitated, then nodded. Once the door was closed, he leaned against my dresser, arms crossed like he was the one who needed protecting. My heart pounded, but my voice stayed calm. I need you to tell me exactly what happened, I said. No script. No, it was an accident. Just the truth. He rubbed a hand over his face. We've already gone over this, Tess. We haven't, I said quietly. You've told everyone the version that makes you look better. Now I want the version where I almost died. He flinched and looked away. Silence thickened between us. I let it sit there. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. We were arguing. I was tired. Mom and Dad had just gone on about my grades again. Then you started talking about the gallery and scholarships and how they only cared about me. You know how that sounded. I stared at him, waiting for him to admit it. He didn't. I snapped, he continued. I got in your face. You didn't back down. You never back down anymore. I grabbed your arm. You said I was proving your point. And I lost it. I shoved you. The words came out rough, like they hurt to say. Good, I thought. They should hurt. Did you see the glass? I asked. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I did. But I wasn't thinking. 1 second you were in front of me, and the next you were gone. Everything was breaking. There was blood, and his voice cracked. I panicked. I told them it was an accident. They grabbed onto that like a life raft. I let his confession hang in the air. I'd already known it in my body, in the deep ache in my bones, in the way my head still throbbed when I moved too fast. But hearing him say it out loud, without the words slipped, changed something. Do you know what it was like listening to all of you when you thought I was gone? I asked. Hearing you promise to stick to the story. Hearing them decide which parts of my pain were convenient enough to keep. He swallowed hard. I was scared. So was I. I shot back. I was scared and paralyzed. And nobody cared what I remembered as long as your future stayed clean. He sank into the chair by my desk. What do you want from me? He whispered. I really looked at him then. He wasn't a monster. He was a scared, angry boy who made one terrible choice, and then another one every day he repeated that lie. Both things could be true. I want you to stop hiding behind them, I said. I want you to tell the truth to someone who isn't me. I want you to stop letting them use my silence as your shield. His shoulders sagged. They'll hate me. They already know, I said. They just like pretending they don't. This isn't about who they love more. It's about whether you're willing to let me carry what you did for the rest of my life. He sat there, torn between fear and guilt. I could see that pushing him harder would just send him back into excuses. So, I did the one thing none of them expected. I recorded this, I said quietly, tapping my phone on the bed. His head snapped up. What? I told you I needed the truth. Now I have it from your own mouth. I'm not posting it or sending it around unless you force me to. But I'm done being the only one paying for your anger. His face went pale. You're blackmailing me. I'm giving you a choice, I said. Either you stand beside me when I tell them the real story, or this recording is how they find out. One way or another, I'm not staying silent anymore. For the first time since the glass shattered, I watched him realize I wasn't just the little sister he could push around. I was the one who decided whether his lie stayed safe, and I wasn't protecting it anymore. The days that followed felt like living next to a ticking bomb. My brother grew quieter, jumpier. My parents tried to slide back into normal, but normal felt like a costume that no longer fit. I started painting again for the first time since the accident. My hands shook at first, then muscle memory took over. One canvas became 2, then 3. The paintings were raw, jagged, fractured shapes and colliding colors that refused to blend. When my aunt saw them, she covered her mouth. This is what it felt like, isn't it? She whispered. Being broken and put back together wrong. I nodded. I'm not just going to tell the story, I said. I'm going to show it. She understood before anyone else that my art wasn't just beauty anymore. It was evidence. Therapy. Testimony. A week later, I asked my parents for a family night. We sat in the living room, the TV off, tension humming in the air. My brother stayed. That mattered. I've been remembering more. I began. My mom stiffened. Honey, the doctor said your memory might be fuzzy. It's not fuzzy, I said. I remember him grabbing me. I remember him seeing the glass. I remember him pushing me. My dad sighed. Tessa, we've been through this. It was an accident. No, I said. He got carried away. I got carried through a door. My brother flinched. I turned to him. You want to say it or should I play it? Play what? My mom asked. I held up my phone. The part where he says what really happened. The part where he says shove. My mom's face drained of color. My dad sat upright. You recorded your own brother? You lied for your own son, I said. Let's not pretend this is about principles. Silence fell. Then my brother spoke, barely audible. She's telling the truth. I pushed her, he said. I saw the glass. I just wanted her to shut up. I didn't mean to hurt her that bad, but I did. And I let you call it an accident because I was scared. The room seemed to exhale all at once. My mom shook her head. We were trying to protect you. You thought my life was a fair price for his future, I said. You thought my silence was manageable. I almost died. I lost weeks of my life. I lost the gallery. I'll live with this injury forever. And you wanted to call it a freak accident so you could sleep at night. Tears slid down my mom's face, and this time, no one tried to wipe them away. We were scared, she whispered. We didn't want the police involved. We didn't want our family torn apart. You tore it apart the second you chose a story over me. I said, I don't know what happens next, but I know one thing. I'm not carrying this alone anymore. I told them calmly and clearly that I had options. I could give the recording to the social worker. I could ask the hospital to update their report. I could go to the police myself when I was ready. Their faces showed me they understood that I meant it. I wasn't threatening out of spite. I was outlining reality. What do you want us to do? My dad finally asked, sounding older than I'd ever heard him. I took a breath. I want honesty with me, with the doctors, with the school. I want you to stop acting like I'm fragile and start treating me like the person you hurt. I want therapy, real therapy for all of us. And I want you to support me going back to my art instead of using my health as an excuse to keep me quiet and at home. They looked at each other, then at my brother, who was still staring at his hands like they were foreign objects. Slowly, they nodded. It wouldn't fix everything. It wouldn't erase the glass, the coma, the lies. But it was the first time I felt the balance shifting back toward me. For once, they were the ones scrambling to adjust to a new reality I had created. Therapy didn't magically solve our problems, but it stripped away a lot of the comfortable lies we'd lived in for years. Sitting in front of a stranger with a notebook, we were forced to say things we'd never dared say out loud at home. My parents had to hear themselves explain why they decided one child's clean record mattered more than the other child's broken body. My brother had to look me in the eye and say the word shove over and over until it stopped sounding like an accident and started sounding like what it was, a choice. I had to confront my own patterns too. The years I'd spent staying quiet to keep the peace. The way I'd convinced myself that being easy and low maintenance meant I was loved. It turned out I wasn't just angry about the night of the glass door. I was angry about every time I'd swallowed hurt so someone else wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. As the months passed, things actually did change. The hospital updated their notes after a follow-up where I explained that my injuries were from being pushed during a fight, not from slipping. The social worker checked in more often. There was talk of consequences, of an incident on his record, of programs and anger management and restitution. For the first time, the word consequence entered our family vocabulary in a real way. My brother started going to therapy on his own. Sometimes he came home drained and quiet. Other times, he'd knock on my door and awkwardly share something he'd realized about himself. About pressure, about how our parents had built him up as the golden child without teaching him what to do with his own frustration. I lived. They did. The night of the exhibition, I stood in a room full of people staring at canvases that had been born from my pain. My parents were there, awkward and proud and guilty all at once. My brother hovered at the back, hands in his pockets, beside one of the largest pieces, a chaotic explosion of color, bursting through a dark, cracked shape that looked suspiciously like a door. There was a small card with my artist's statement. It didn't name names. It didn't tell the whole story, but it said, enough. It said that sometimes the people who hurt you are the ones who are supposed to protect you. It said that waking up from a coma can mean more than just opening your eyes. It can mean realizing your life was built on a story that never belonged to you. It said that telling the truth, even quietly, can be an act of revenge and an act of healing. At the same time, after the show, my aunt hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. You did it, she whispered. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something that's yours. Walking out of the gallery that night, the air felt different, lighter. My brother caught up to me on the sidewalk.
I saw your statement, he said. I know it was about me.
I looked at him. It was about all of us, I replied.
About
what happens when we choose silence over truth. He nodded, eyes wet. I'm trying,
he said.
I know, I answered. And I'm not waiting for you to finish trying to live my life. That's what changed most after the coma. Not just our family dynamic, not just the way they looked at me. I changed. I stopped measuring my worth by how much trouble I didn't cause. I stopped letting fear of ruining the family keep me from protecting myself.